Well, folks, a T758 Panzer is finally earning its keep. So I don't know if I'm going to be doing more than just the Allis-Chalmers B for this video, but we are going to be starting up some tractors, at least this one, and maybe a couple of the Fords while we're at it. Because it's a nice, sunny, warm day here in late March, and I figured it's a good time to start waking up some of the farm tractors around here and at least getting everything running again. So my intention is to do a repair or a revamp video on this come late spring, early summer, or at least sometime in the warmer months this year. I've had this for about 2 years. You guys see clips of it in the opener for my videos where me and Dad are getting it running and it's smoking like crazy. And this sat behind the garage for about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. And unfortunately, I never covered it. It got water in the engine, it seized, and we ended up getting it freed up and running that day. I had a lot of diesel fuel and ATF down the cylinders, and it actually wasn't too stuck because I didn't have water in it that long. So it freed up nice, and we have to do a redneck oil change on this, which is what I call just dumping out the white milky oil and then putting in used engine oil. That way it flushes everything out before it gets a formal oil change, because there's really no sense in wasting good oil on a really nasty oil change just to get everything flushed out of the engine. So we're going to take care of that, let the thing run for a little while, and then I might fire up some other stuff too and just kind of do a quick startup video here. Nothing really in depth or anything like that. So anyways, folks, let's drain some oil and get to it. So I didn't mention it before we got this thing running, I did drain out about at least a gallon of water out of this thing. Yep, and there's still some in there. Oh, that is some bad stuff. And that is why I wanted to dump this before I started it again. That's terrible. As you guys can see, it's some pretty bad stuff that was in there. Definitely a lot of crap and whatnot. So most likely when I go through this, I am going to pull the oil pan off of it and just make sure everything's cleaned out of there for sludge and whatnot, because with that water sitting in there for about a year or so, I'm sure it created quite a bit of it. So when I brought this up here back in December, which was only about 3 or 4 months ago at this point, I had put an oily rag and an old spray can cap over the top of this exhaust manifold. Hopefully this thing will adjust down inside it here. So you can see that's where the opening is. And when this exhaust goes in here, it sits to the inside of that opening and it just kind of drops in real easy like, which is great because you can take it off and cover the thing with the tarp really nicely. But unfortunately, a lot of the water ran down inside of it and, of course, runs right into the engine as well. So this oil is stuff that I drain out of equipment, and I always keep about a gallon of it on hand for topping off tractors. Not like this, but you know, really crappy stuff that I have to get running and make sure it runs first. And I should have enough to do this. And this stuff, you can probably see it in the camera, it's not great stuff, but it's also not like the really thick, heavy, nasty black stuff that you drain out of tractors that have never been drained in years. Not on the stick yet. And of course, if I don't have enough, I'm just gonna go over to some Gravely's down the hill that I'm gonna be stripping in the springtime for parts and just drain out some more oil, which is what I did earlier today because I didn't have a full gallon here. I think we'll have enough though, because we're just starting to hit the stick. We're about 3/8 of an inch up on it. Now we're getting some crap at the bottom of this thing. Alright, so that's good enough. and we're actually up to the full mark. So these must take 4 quarts of oil, and let's see. As you can see, that's the quality of the oil. So it's not really that bad. It's dark when you're pouring it, but when it's on the stick, it actually looks pretty fair. So that'll be plenty sufficient to run this thing for a little while and get everything flushed out of it. Alright, so we're all ready to fire up. Hopefully this thing still has spark. I am going to have to either have this magneto rebuilt, or if I can find another one to change out with this one, because I did have some issues with it when we got this going in December, and I had to put another coil and condenser in it because it just had intermittent spark and wasn't working very well. I also have to get the fuel line squared away on this too, because I just have to put a shut off in here for the time being and get rid of the bowl. And I did rebuild the carburetor. It was actually very clean inside when I got it, so it was just a quick clean and a gasket, and it doesn't seem like we're leaking. So all right, let's give this thing a crank and see if it'll light off. So I did pop a couple times, but this this is why electric starts really nice. Okay, the heck with this. Alright, so I thought it'd be kind of neat to be able to crank start this thing over. Obviously that's not going to happen. So I did hook the starter up. The teeth on this flywheel and the Bendix on the starter are really bad because they've been just hammered because somebody had a 12-volt battery in this thing and it just beat the snot out of the teeth. So it will work, but you got to kind of keep clocking it until you can catch the right teeth for it to turn with. So let's try this and see if it'll kick. I will be replacing these, the ring gear and the Bendix, and putting it back to a 6-volt. Starts like a bear, but it sounds nice. Alright, let's see if I can wear my arm out again. Curious to know if it'll crank start now that it's warmed up. There we go. Obviously enough, it's going to need a lot of tune-up work, but I hope to get to this project this year and get everything squared away and gone through. And I have the original generator to convert this back to 6 volts, and then of course, like I said, I'm going to have to get the ring gear and the starter Bendix replaced as well. And of course, while I'm in there, I might as well do a clutch at the same time. I really don't have a use for the tractor, but being that it's running, and it actually runs fairly well, there's no sense in parting it out or anything like that. It's a good usable tractor still. So as long as time allows in between work, hopefully I can get to this project this year for the 3rd year in a row. But anyways, while we're up here, we might as well take a crack at the 51 Ford 8N and see if we can get that thing to fire up as well. So for those of you who remember, we did a repair and start up, a pretty extensive one actually, a revamp last year on this tractor. And a customer of mine, his mother bought this brand new in 1951. They ran it for years, and then it was sitting in a bunch of weeds when I was down there. He said that he wanted to get rid of it, and the price was right. It was 500 bucks. Has good tires on the back of it, so I figured if nothing else, it would be good for the tires. So I went down and grabbed it. It actually turned out to be kind of a neat tractor. And of course, I always like the character on it, as you guys know, with the crusty tractor fleet that's been growing around here. Luckily enough, this has a starter that works, so I don't have to crank the heck out of it. And I also have to, at some point, replace the shutoff bowl underneath this thing too, because I put a new one on there, but unfortunately it was a crappy bowl, wasn't very well made, so you really can't shut it off all the way, and unfortunately it does leak. Not profusively, but it drips enough. So I'm just going to put enough in here to see if we can splash enough down into the carburetor, get it to run for a little bit. That is one fine running Ford 8N tractor, folks. Can't read the dang thing, but the hour meter still works. All right, a couple days later here, folks. Still a nice, warm, sunny March day, and I decided to do one more startup for this video, and this time we're going to be firing up my Ford 641 with the 7-foot flail mower on it. I don't know what year this is because the serial number doesn't come up on any of the charts. I don't know if there was a number under some paint that I'm missing, or if somebody didn't stamp one of the numbers in it, because it doesn't match up with anything. But anyways, I've had this for a couple of years now. It's been a good, reliable tractor, and it does need the engine gaskets resealed, the valve cover and the lifter covers and all that, because it leaks pretty well when it's running. But aside from that, it does run well. And I don't think it's been started since, if I remember correctly, December or so. It's been sitting all winter. Alright, fuel's all set. I dumped a little bit more in there. I usually don't keep much in this thing because it spends the majority of its time sitting around. So let's see if this thing will crank up and fire. This has always been a good running tractor since I revamped it. Never had any issues with it. The engine's pretty well worn out, but it does its time when I brush hog with it. Has no issue running all day long, and even it is worn out as it still has plenty of power to run that 7-foot flail mower, so needed a lot of work when I got it, but it was well worth it. It's a nice rig to use. And then I also picked up a 841 Ford with a Wagner pipe frame loader on it. That was last year. And that's slated for a revamp too, so that way I have a larger tractor when I move out of here to move equipment around, and I can put forks on it and stuff. And I'm not into it for that much, so it'll all work out. But I do really like these 100 Series 4s. They're nice, simple tractors to work on, and they're good for 3-point hitch and brush hogging work. So anyways, folks, there you have it. That's just a few tractor startups for the early spring.